I know this is going to sound like gross clickbait, but please just hear me out. You have the potential to write songs like Porter Robinson, Millennium, Griffin, Madian, or whoever you happen to worship. Hello, fellow producers. This is Onesto, and today I'm going to teach you how to master anything in music production. Even as I still say this, it sounds so clickbaity, and I hate that stuff. But what I'm going to share with you is just how people who are great at stuff, this is how they get great at things. And there's some good news and bad news. I'll start with the bad news. The bad news is that what I'm going to share with you is pretty boring. It's quite ordinary. It's not going to feel like a big old deal. But the good news is that it means that practically anyone can become world-class at just about anything. What I'm talking about is deliberate practice. When I first heard of that term, I rolled my eyes because I felt like I practiced a whole lot. I felt like I was always being super careful on how I spent my time, but my improvement never felt like it was growing as fast as I wanted to. And I thought that maybe I just don't have what it takes for music production. But I was wrong, and that's really good news because the reason why I wasn't improving was not because I didn't have any talent. It was because I was not practicing the right way. And a while ago, I read this book called Peak by Anders Ericsson. He spent much of his life studying how people become the best at their field. And his book boils down to this: the longer someone practices deliberately, the better they will be. He tells this story early in his career where he studied violinists from this world-class school in Europe. So he got all these violinists, he split them up into good, better, and best. And he tried to see what it was that was separating each one from one another. And his conclusion is both anticlimactic, but pretty encouraging. The best violinists were the best because they had been deliberately practicing longer than the others. That's it. That was the biggest factor. Not coming from a musical background, not having innate talent, not having access to the best teachers. I mean, that stuff helps in the beginning, but in the long run, what wins is a combination of time and deliberate practice. Now, I don't know about you, but this was something that I needed to hear. I started music production when I was 28 or 29, which is really old in music production terms. And it would bother me so much when I would be listening to a track written by a 17-year-old and just be drooling over it. I'm looking at you, Jaren. But when I read this, I felt like this pressure was lifted off my chest because I can become as talented as a 17-year-old. I just need to keep going. You just need to keep going. However, we need to keep going in the terms of deliberate practice. Okay, so in this video, I'm going to define deliberate practice. I'm going to break it down into its traits and then show you how you can start applying it to your life today. So what is deliberate practice? Deliberate practice is practice that is both purposeful and informed. I always saw practice as something purposeful. It's when you might try really hard to push yourself to improve or learn something. And this usually looks like you repeating something over and over and over again until you get better at it. And that's improvement for sure. But there's a point to where you're just going to plateau. See, deliberate practice is way more strategic. It's purposeful practice that knows where it's going to go and how it's going to get there. I'll repeat that because that's a pretty good definition. Deliberate practice is much more strategic. It's purposeful practice that knows where it's going and how it's going to get there. So let's break this down into its traits because this is where I think some light bulbs will start going off. There's quite a few traits of deliberate practice, but they all connect together. So first of all, it involves developing a skill at a field that's already been figured out. And oftentimes you'll develop that skill in the same way that a master has already mastered it themselves. So you don't want to create something out of scratch. Another trait is that it involves a practice regimen that's designed and overseen by a coach who's further along than you. This coach is going to be so key to deliberate practice. I'll talk more about it later. Deliberate practice will consistently take place outside of your comfort zone. Oftentimes it focuses on your weaknesses and it's usually pushing you beyond your current abilities. You need to have these well-defined specific goals. You don't want just overall improvement because you'll get nowhere. If you want to focus and hone in on a specific skill, once again, you want a coach to help oversee this. This is a really important trait. It's deliberate practice involves feedback. The more immediate and direct that feedback, the better. And from this feedback, you will make direct modifications to your own systems and the way you do things. What's interesting is that at the beginning, a coach is going to be pointing out a lot of your mistakes, giving you a whole lot of feedback, but you'll eventually get to a point as you get better and better at something where you can spot your own mistakes. And that's a really, really cool part. Before I go on to the next aspect of deliberate practice, if this video is low-key blowing your mind, just let me know by liking this video. And I'm curious if you can tell me in the comments below, which of these traits so far has been really resonating with you? All right, here's the next trait. Deliberate practice creates and depends on mental representations. And what is a mental representation? It's when your brain starts to take really complex stuff and it just starts to feel simpler and simpler and simpler. Because think about it, your brain, your mind is learning all these new ways to take complex information and how to is trying to find better ways to understand it, better ways to interpret it, hold it in your memory, organize it, analyze it, make decisions. I think this illustration will help. So I have a really close friend of mine. He just got his first DAW. It's super adorable. And it's funny because he's so slow at using it. And why is he slow? Because whenever he opens this DAW up, there are like hundreds and thousands of new points of information that's pummeling his mind time and time again. But the thing is this, as he starts to build mental representations, his brain will go from like, oh, I need to warp this audio so it's in time. Okay, step 1, blah, blah, blah. Step 2. It's going to go from like this long drawn out process to, all right, cool. I got to warp this audio. Boom. And here's some encouragement. The relationship between skill and mental representation is an upward spiral, not a downward one. Thank goodness. So the more skilled you become as something, the better your mental representations are. And the better your mental representations are, the more effectively you can practice and hone your skills. And the final trait I want to let you in on is that someone needs to cheer you on and help maintain that motivation. This can be your coach, family member, friend, spouse, just someone, because deliberate practice is a lot of hard work, and maintaining that motivation is going to be one of the keys to improvement. All right, so check this out. I know what I said is a whole lot. And if there's one thing I want you to walk away with, is this. I really want you to get a coach or a coach-like person in your life. That's the most important thing you can do for success. In that book, Peak by Anders Ericsson, he keeps repeating how the coach is critical for that improvement to become like world-class or become great at something. I've had several coaches in the past, and I found that when I have someone walking alongside me, I consistently make the biggest strides in my own development. I don't know why it works that way. It just does. And for me, real life coaches are better. It doesn't have to be in person, it can be virtual and all that stuff. But coaches are so much better for me than a tutorial or online class. I'm not saying that I'm not telling you to don't watch tutorials or don't do online courses. I'm just saying that those things take a very distant second place to what it's like to have a coach. And sure, you don't need to hire someone. I mean, if you have friends who are better than you at music production and who can give you clear and direct feedback, then that's perfect. So now let me show you how I would apply deliberate practice right now. This is a real thing. I want to get better at percussion sound design. Whenever I'm done with a song, I always wonder if my percussion sucks. I have no clue. I have no idea if it's good or bad or whatever. So I want to get better at percussion sound design. But I would even argue that that is way too broad. So one of the first steps, which I did, which is to identify my weakness. And I want to get more specific than percussion sound design. So let's focus on kicks and snares. How do I layer them? How do they process them? How do I get them to work together? And in an ideal world, this is what I would do. Before my next producer coaching call, I would hit up my coach. I would ask him, hey, I want to get better at kicks and snares. My coach would then direct me to some videos, courses, blogs, just resources in general that have pros teaching how to develop great kicks and snares. Ideally, the coach would give me some kind of challenge, like a homework assignment of sorts, that will allow me to reach outside my current abilities and to just practice this thing, focusing solely on kicks and snares. And then when I would meet with my coach, I would demonstrate what I learned. I would show kicks and snares that I've created and how I got there. And my coach would be encouraging me, all the stuff that I did correctly. He would point it out, tell me hey, that's great, keep going. And he would also give me any feedback to adjust any bad habits or just correct something that I'm doing poorly or inefficiently. And then after that coaching session, he might give me more resources to go through and continue exercising that if I want to keep developing that. Okay, I know that saying all this out loud sounds like a crazy person. It doesn't sound glamorous. It doesn't sound fun at all. And the truth is, it's not fun. Remember those violinists I told you about at the beginning of this video? The crazy thing is that when those violinists, the good, better, and best, when they all talked about deliberate practice, they all said that it's not fun to do. They don't hate it, but it's not something they enjoy. It's not the biggest highlight of their day. But they do deliberate practice. They put all that focus into the practice because it allows them to do all the fun stuff, which is to perform at the highest level. And as you try this out, you'll experience those rewarding results. Apply deliberate practice to anything in music production. It can be chord progressions, creating melodies, sound design, whatever. I'm not saying any of this will be easy to accomplish. It's going to be pretty hard. It's going to be hard because you're constantly forcing yourself to stretch yourself outside your abilities. It's going to be hard because you are always addressing your weaknesses. That sucks and it's hard to do. But I'm telling you, do this and deliberate practice will get so much easier to do, and your songwriting will get better and you'll be faster at it. I hope that this video is helpful for you. If you try deliberate practice on your own and find that oh, hey, that guy on YouTube might be onto something, please let me know in the comments, because I want to celebrate with you. And don't forget to subscribe so you'll never miss out on one of my brand new weekly tutorial videos. If you want to learn how to use one of my favorite plugins or learn some more music production tips, just click one of the videos here. I hope I can see you again in the future. Later.